All right, Chris Ramsey. Chris, thanks for being with us again.
Fantastic. Thank you a lot for inviting me. I enjoyed it last time.
Yeah, podcast number 2, backed by popular demand.
There you go.
We've never had a more popular podcast, Chris, so thanks again. And what we thought we'd do with the @Coerver Coaching Instagram account was ask our audience some questions for you, because we got loads of comments and questions. Can we ask Chris this, X, Y, and Z? So I've got basically the format of this sort of next hour. Chris will be asking you the questions from our audience.
Of course, absolutely no problem.
Brilliant. And they're mostly grassroots coaches, and I think that's what we're trying to do with this podcast, transfer the sort of skills, knowledge and expertise and experience from pros like yourself to the grassroots. So I'm going to ask the first question, and it's quite a good one. What's the single best piece of coaching advice, Chris, that you've ever received from someone?
Keep it simple and be versatile.
Okay.
Those two.
And do you see, from the simplicity perspective, do you see that people try and make things a bit too complicated and in the grassroots game and the pro game?
Yeah, I think in all the football, people try to make it complicated, but in the end, it is a simple game, you know. Yeah. And I think, especially in grassroots, you know, that people try to get players to emulate players that are at the end of their careers, you know, top players. You wouldn't do it at school. You wouldn't try and teach a primary school kid, you know, quantum physics from university level.
Right.
So you always start off at the basics, and then you build it from there. A lot of the times, I find that age appropriate is the thing that's lacking, and more importantly, ability appropriate. So, you know, do people move them into more difficult situations when things are too easy, and do they take them out of difficult situations when things are too hard? So understanding where the player's at is probably the most important thing.
Interesting. And in terms of complexity, you know, I guess if you're working with players, this has got also something to do with contact time, right? So if you're a grassroots coach just working, you know, once a week with your side on training on Tuesday night, you probably don't have enough time to get over any complex messages or anything like that, or right? So therefore the time kind of dictates, no, keep it simple, let's sort of build slowly and add from there.
Yeah, I mean, you're only working with people, players sparingly. It's important to make sure that they enjoy it, so they come back. And during that enjoyment, they might produce stuff that they probably wouldn't have done in a more structured session.
Yes.
And I think it's really important that people make sure that the less time you have, the more game time. You know, you know, and you can structure games to have certain outcomes in it as well. You know.
One of the other questions we had, Chris, about simplicity, actually, it ties in really nicely, was around communication to players just pre-game and during game. But pre-game and half-time, for example, have you got any advice around sort of keeping things simple, what sort of instructions, how long you should speak, all of these things? Because I see it every weekend, you see different managers do different things. Is there...
Well, I think everybody, you give them specific tasks for themselves, but the younger they are, I think that you want to keep it short, to speak to the group, make sure that they're enjoying it, especially at grassroots, and you might give them one or two things that you want them to do, and based on their strengths, mainly based on their strengths, and then overpraise when they do it. Because then they will do it again, you know, and even when they try to do it and it doesn't work, make sure that you've acknowledged that they've tried to do it.
Yeah.
So, especially with the young ones, they need to know that if something's not working, that it's okay to do it.
So with, you mentioned sort of individual tasks as well, Chris. Would you do that pre-kickoff? Maybe when the warm-up's going on, would you go around, even at the grassroots level, say 7v7 sort of format, would you go around and say to the centre mid, this is what I'm looking, the two things I'm looking for from you today, the striker, etc., and then do that first and then do a team thing? Or what do you think the best approach is?
I think it depends on what your connection is with the players and the group. You know, I think connecting with the group is really important. I mean, one of the things I've always told coaches to do, you know, is always make sure you know what they're watching on telly. You know what they're outside football. So when you're speaking to them, you're not just speaking about football. You're speaking about cartoons, or it might be something that they're watching on a certain program. So once you get that connection, you can then add little things in about football or about their game. But and you have to look at the level of the players. You know, that if the level's quite good, you can give them more detailed instruction.
Sure.
If the level's quite low, then I think it's important to just make sure that the group understands what you're trying to achieve in any given game.
That connection bit, Chris, goes in well to another question we had about in modern society where screen time's a thing. It's very difficult to not avoid it, but it's just part of life now.
Of course.
What would you recommend to coaches about sort of associating or the connection with screen time and advice around use of screens around football? I think one of the things is obviously you have to move with the times, which I've been fortunate to have been in 47, 48 years, not because I've done, what was being done 20, 30 years ago. It's about maintaining that thread, but making sure it's relevant for the time that you're in. Yeah.
And kids are on screen times now, and we know their attention span is a lot less than it was before. So giving them snappy bits of information is going to be important, and also not just watching highlights. If you're just watching highlights, you're going to fail, because the highlights are end products. That's why they're highlights. So the game lasts 90 to 100 minutes now. Yeah. And when you see the highlights, they're things that will happen once or twice in a game. So ensuring that the players are good at basic things, that gives them the foundation to do the highlights. So a lot of the times you see people doing round the worlds and stuff like that, and they can't pass it or they can't control it.
Sure.
So the basics are so important in order to get the players to move to the next level.
A sort of follow-on question, Chris, was about, I guess, particularly with teenagers and this generation of teenagers, social media being a big change from when we were growing up, etc. Have you got any communication tips how to connect with young men or women in the teenage years?
Well, teenagers are always going to be going through that injection of testosterone where they have their mood swings are quite varied. So it's important, obviously, to try to connect with the individual rather than just connect with the group. The group's important, but individuals are important, and trying to notice things about them. But I think basic all-round conversation sometimes leads you into stuff that are just not football related.
Yeah.
And I think if you only talk about football, I think that there's only one level of communication. And you might not find out things that are going on with them outside football that may be affecting their football.
And I guess that deeper connection helps establish trust and belief, I guess, in what you're trying to ask them to do. Yeah. And I think that credibility bit, Chris, if you're asking them to play a certain way, for example, that might be against what their parents are thinking is the right way, etc., that deeper connection is important.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that happens with parents, when they look at a game and their son or daughter's not on the ball, they forget that you're only on the ball for a minute to 2 minutes in a game. So most of the time you're not on the ball.
Sure.
So if you're playing in grassroots where it's maybe 3-a-side, 5-a-side, 7-a-side, you're probably going to be on the ball more because smaller pitch, more likely that you're going to be closer to get into the ball because of the distances. But when you're playing in a big game, you're hardly ever on the ball. I did a video cam of Steve Gerrard once for the parents. And it was about a minute and a half, 2 minutes, and all it was him moving to receive, didn't get it, running into the box, didn't get it, dropping back into position, didn't get it, and then probably after 7 or 8 different moves, he got the ball.
Right.
Well, if you're a parent, what the parents will say is, well, no one passes to him. Whereas preparation means that you're generally not on the ball. So understanding what your son or daughter's position is and what they have to do is, I think, really important. I think it's something that parents don't fully understand. So going back onto how long you're on the ball, I mean, I did another one with, I think Gareth Bale scored a hat-trick against Sunderland, and I condensed all his touches into a small clip. And it ended up being like a minute 45, but he scored a hat trick.
Amazing.
So when you look at it, for the other 89 minutes, 88 minutes, he's in preparation mode, going to receive, don't get it, pass it. When you're passing it, you 0.1 of a second. So people don't look at what the game is. They just look at their son. And if you go and watch any game, you'll just watch one player.
Sure.
They hardly touch the ball.
Interesting.
In what you're watching.
And parents, Chris, this is a big topic in terms of the questions for you on our Instagram. How do you, and you must have been asked this question a million times, particularly when it comes to development versus performance versus winning or losing, etc. What are your tips on how to effectively communicate the benefit of that sort of longer term approach versus winning today?
Well, it depends what you're taking your child to there for.
Right.
If you want your child to be a professional footballer, or you want your child to enjoy themselves. Now, I think the first thing that you should be taking your child there is to enjoy themselves, because it's very important for the rest of their life that they have good experiences when they go to football, especially at a young age. But what they're doing is comparing to the end product, which you would never do.
Yeah.
So trying to make sure first of all the enjoyment's there. And then understanding the level of their talent, so understanding where they fit and what's important. Now, if winning's important, solely winning is important, then you're probably not going to get to the promised land, because physicality with kids is important. And obviously the best dribbler usually is one that everybody sees. But if you have a big physical team that just wins, then a lot of the times the coaches, a lot of them are, and not disrespecting the coaches, because they're the volunteers, you can't actually put a price on what they do. They probably haven't got the skills to bring out the stuff that needs to be brought out of somebody that's excelling because of their physicality. So if you looked at, say, someone like Wayne Rooney, he wasn't very tall, but he was always a physical specimen. And the people that were at Everton at the time had the skills to make sure that he stayed ahead of the group. So he would have been ahead of the group because of his physicality, but also his ability. And they would keep polishing that ability to make sure he stayed ahead of the group. A lot of the times you get over-maturated players that fail because they hit a ceiling and people stop really coaching them because they're excelling at that time.
And it sort of hides their weaknesses in the way.
Yeah. But it hides the things that are essential.
Right.
It hides what they should be good at. So, if we talk about winning the ball in the air, are they running, jumping off one leg and punching through it over their shoulder with the front of their forehead? No, they're just jumping because they're bigger than everybody else, and their technique will be caught up when everybody else catches up to their level. Now, if you coach the players that are succeeding at the time, if you coach them the same as everybody else, or not the same, but give them what's required, they would always stay ahead, because they're succeeding now, and what you're doing is you're pulling away. Whereas a lot of times people just let them get away with bad play or not succeeding in making sure that their skills are improved because they've won the game.
How important is it for the players to have agency in this regards too, Chris, to understand strengths and weaknesses? Weaknesses, okay, might be a short-term issue, but this is something I've got to work on. Can you talk about some of the best players you've worked with and how they address their weaknesses and how hard they work at sort of improving them? Well,
first and foremost, when we put the two programs that I've just been working with at Tottenham and QPR, we work from a strength based. So we very rarely work on weaknesses unless it's going to stop you.
Right. Okay.
So if you're a centre half and you can't head it, that's a weakness. That's going to stop you being a centre half. If you're a winger and you can't cross it, it's going to stop you. So if that's a weakness, we need to work on it. But if you're a winger and we're working on defending the far post, I'm probably not going to spend a lot of time working on that, because you're not going to be very good at it anyway, and you probably are going to hit a ceiling at 5 or 6. So I'm going to work on what you're good at, and then anything that's essential that is a weakness, then we work on that.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting, because I think about Messi and sort of some of the training programs that he works on, and everyone obviously knows about his left foot, but I also understand how much he works on his right foot as well, and how, he scored millions of goals with the right foot as well.
Yeah.
But it's just, a player of that caliber can also think, I still need to work on something. Could you give us any examples of that sort of approach, Chris?
I think that you have to be. I think two-sidedness gives you a better view of the pitch.
Yeah.
So if you're right-footed and you can open up on your left side, you can see the pitch, you can always go back to your right foot.
Yeah.
So working on those types of things, which will be a weakness if you can't open up both sides. And a lot of players can't. They just turn into their opponent because they're not good both sides. So you look at the top players, they will always be able to see the pitch and see most of the pitch. So I think things like that are important, and also ensuring that you're aware of the things that are going to cause you a problem in a game, and sometimes you might need to polish them slightly in order for you to get to the next level.
Is that one of the benefits, Chris, of having the inverted wingers? Like, why is everyone doing that? And is it because Pep likes it and everyone's copying, or what's the benefit of playing that way?
Yeah, I think inverted wingers, it depends on the players that you've got, and then what type of crosses you want to come in. So generally, I like players playing on the side that they're comfortable at.
Yeah.
But however, when you cut inside, that's where you probably need to work on your developing side, because to have a shot when you cut inside with your not dominant side, probably is not going to be as accurate. So a lot of times people do that because people, when you come inside, you can play in midfield, you can thread the ball in a little bit easier, and I would imagine as well that your types of crosses that you have. So if you look at an area of the 6-yard box, I call the second triangle, which is the point of the 6-yard box. Okay. You bend the cross towards there, keeper can't really come and get it. So either you're going to score, or it's going to be a 2-touch finish where you head it back into the mix. So that's very difficult to defend at times, and also for the keeper to come and get it, it's quite difficult. So that's probably why people do that, and
right.
And style of play, what you prefer.
Yeah. One of the players we were talking about quickly that you've worked with at QPR, Eze at Palace, is so. I mean, he's had such a great season, but that sort of pocket that he picks up on the left and how he cuts on the right. Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about him, Chris, and what you think his strengths were? And obviously his personality comes across, he's such a positive and humble person.
I mean, look, he's a good person, and you know what, and he's a dedicated person, and he's a person that worked a lot on his game. As regards improving the things that he wasn't good at, and most of the things he wasn't good at was out of possession.
Right.
So people looked at him as a luxury, which he wasn't. But because of the way he is, people would tend to think he was lazy, but he never was. And he would work on the stuff that has made him where he is now. And if you look at him, he's quite two-sided. He can see a lot of the pitch. And and his the weight of his passing is incredible.
Yeah.
As well as his ball striking. And now if you look at him, I don't think he's ever scored a headed goal. So as much as we might work on that, that's not going to be something that you're going to work on at the cost of working on his corner taking or free kick taking. You have to look at which one is going to actually get him to the level that he needs to be at.
Right.
So basically work on the strength first.
Interesting.
And improve the weakness if it's there.
Yeah. And I assume, like you mentioned about maybe that sort of defensive side was the area he needed to work in. There was buy-in when you were coaching, this is what we need to do, this is how you can become more effective there, and seems to have worked really hard at it. And
I mean, we say buy-in, really it was at that stage of his career, it wasn't him buying into it, it was about him complying,
doing his job.
Do you know what I mean? Which he knew he had to do in order to win the managers over that put him in the team. So at that stage of his career, he was willing to do anything that was necessary to get to the next level, and that's a true professional, really.
Attention coaches and players, introducing the new and improved Coerver Soccer app. It's called Coerver Soccer Skills, and we're very proud to be able to help you become a better player and coach, and fast. With expert-led drills, skills challenges and real-time progress, coaches will develop better practices that challenge and improve all of your players, regardless of their ability. Guess what? It's also easy to use and time-tested, and the improved content that we've learned from over these 40 years can be prescribed for you so you can see your session plans, or you can create your own using the Coerver session planner. You'll save time and there'll be no more research needed for YouTube. You get 40 years of tried and tested know-how in the palm of your hand. Enjoy the app now, coaches. On the topic of defending, Chris, one of the things you said on the last podcast, and this is a question that we got, you talked about coaching, tackling, and specifically blocking and rolling. We got a couple of questions actually about what you meant by that, and it'd be great to, blocking and rolling.
Block and roll for small players. You know, instead of getting under people and going into that challenge, it's about you block and sort of roll the ball over their foot, or you roll it. So your momentum's taking you forward with the ball.
Is it like a ricochet or
that kind of thing? But a lot of times, what happens is with players, they try to get involved with challenges that they're not going to win.
Sure.
And all you're looking for those little clever players that can just nip it past somebody. So if you roll it over someone's foot, if you even when you're going into something, if you think about between your knee and your foot, you can't really do anything with that. So if someone flicks it over there, it's not a place that you can really win the ball. But anything lower down is going to be a block tackle.
Right.
So you're just looking at, can you just get the ball? Can you just nick it over their shin, sort of thing?
Interesting.
And for young players, for the smaller players, not everybody's going to be a slide tackler. Not everybody's going to be someone who's going to come in and with a crunching tackle. So you have to also give them sort of opportunities to be involved in winning the ball back and regaining the ball.
You also talked a lot about interceptions, Chris, and what advice would you have, for example, for a young central midfield player that might not be that tall or big? How can they help their team with interceptions? And maybe it's their first year playing 11v11. Is there any positional or other tips that you could give them to help them think about intercepting more?
No, normally what happens is obviously they're cat and mouse. The better are you at cat and mouse, the more likely you're going to intercept. But the thing is as well is I find that a lot of players who are not that good at tackling tend to anticipate too early. So what happens is they get played past. So you all of a sudden you're anticipating, you're not really giving them the eyes. You're sort of almost like, I know you're going to play it there, I'm on my way, my body shape's in a certain way, and they play behind you. So it's almost saying, well, I know you're going to play it there, but I'm kidding you on that I don't know. And looking at situations like that, and getting people to overpass. So if you get into a situation where you're saying, right, you think you're mugging me off, but you've made 4 passes now, I'm going to intercept that. So it's just that little bit of cat and mouse that you can play with your opponents.
Very good. Getting back to some of the questions, Chris. In terms of pre-match, we got a couple of questions around warm-up and what you would suggest, particularly for grassroots teams, probably U15 under. Are there a couple of exercises or a couple of topics you'd always do for a warm-up at the grassroots level?
No, I would. In grassroots, no, not really. What I would look at is if you've got a certain pattern of play that you want them to try, I would do that as a passing drill. Yeah. Or might do it in hands. Might do a lot of handball. So you get in shape when you play with your hands, and then you can talk about foot patterns, spins, backward pedaling, that sort of thing.
What do you mean spins and foot patterns, Chris? Can you elaborate a bit on that?
If you look at, for argument's sake, you pass the ball in and you're going to spin in behind. How do you spin? How do you get your shoulders round? Is the defender in front of you? If defender's in front of you, then can you check back and get the ball, give yourself a yard? Okay. Those sort of things. The defenders, if you spin and get your shoulders completely round and you're level with the defender, then the ball's going to go in behind because you're going to win. You're going to win the race because they can't catch you. And
you mentioned hands as well. I assume you're going to make the pitch a bit smaller, just positionally, so they know.
Just smaller, just put them in a shape, and then you just do it with the hands. Because if you do it with the hands, the ball doesn't break down so much.
Sure.
But you're just giving them an idea of where you want them to be and stuff like that.
And you would spend sort of 5 minutes on that. Obviously, young kids probably
5 minutes.
Yeah, and then maybe get into some touches,
and then get some touches on the ball, and maybe do it in how the shape that they're going to start. But as you know, the younger they are, there's no shape really, is there? They just play, which is what you want them to do.
Chris, I've got a question for you, which I was asked recently by a ladies team that I coach. And their concern was throw-ins, corners, we give the ball straight back to the other team every time.
Yeah.
So could you give some advice to all grassroots teams about simple ways to, I guess, retain possession from set pieces?
Well, throw-ins, nobody practices them. So you could do the throw-ins in a warm-up. And what you want to do is where you're going to throw it, how hard you're going to throw it. Are you going to throw it so that someone can chest it back or head it back?
Yeah.
Or is it going to be a volley? You know, you've got to decide.
Or do you go back to come the other way, or
yeah, well, it's giving the ball away. It just that.
Yeah.
People don't realise that the throw-in is a pass. So if you're a fullback, one of your passes is a throw-in.
Yeah.
So you've got 6 passes, 7 really with a throw-in. So if you don't practice it, you're not going to be good at it.
what are the 7 passes, Chris?
Well,
I'll put you on the spot here.
You got, if you're a 2, you got into the 7.
Yeah.
That's 1. You got throw-in, that's 2.
Okay.
You got into the centre forward, that's 3. Into feet.
Yeah.
You got the channel, that's 4.
Yeah.
You got back to the centre half, 5.
Yeah.
And into the midfield player, 6. And luxury is diag.
Okay.
Luxury.
Yeah.
But you're probably hardly ever going to do it.
Nice to have, but
Yeah, nice to have. But if you, as you get older, if you can't do 3 of the passes, you're not going to play.
yeah.
So if you can't play into the winger and play into the channel and play into the centre forward, you're not going to be a 2.
And is that taught at like the academy level? Is that taught like position specifically? Is that sort of taught, or is it just assessed? Like we brought you in, you got to be able to do that, or do you work with players individually?
Yeah,
like that?
I've got a job description for all players. I call it Basel to Barcelona. So it just means that everybody in that position does that, and then how you do it depends on what team you're going to play for and the level you're going to play at, how well you are at it, and obviously the philosophy of the team. So
Are there some summaries, Chris, that you could give our grassroots coaches, like defenders, midfielders, rather than breaking it down to 2 or 3?
Yeah,
or whatever?
if you're a defender, there's a couple of things you're going to have to do, aren't you? Well, you just four things in regaining the ball. Right. Can you win it? If you can't win it, can you make play predictable?
Yep.
If you can't make play predictable, can you support the first defender?
Yep.
And then team function.
And can you explain play? Did you say play predictable and team function?
Right.
Could
so
you
first
explain both
first,
those points?
If you're a centre forward, for argument's sake,
Yeah.
and the other team are being sloppy at the back, can you win it? Can you intercept, or can you tackle somebody? If you can't, and they pass it to somebody else, then you have to make the play go in a direction that suits your team.
Okay.
Right? Now, if they move the ball to let's visualise it. One centre half plays to the other centre half, so you can't win it, so you cut the other centre half off. That centre half then plays to their fullback. Now you're centre forward now, and your wide player goes and shuts down the fullback. Now you're supporting the first defender. You have to go over and help him or her. Okay. Now, so you've made play predictable. You're supporting the first defender, and then they launch it into your half. Now you're in team function, aren't you? Because you're going to drop back into an area that's going to help the team.
Interesting.
That's
okay.
it. There's nothing else.
How about midfield, Chris? What are the
what to win the ball?
Well, no, the summary sort of you mentioned 4 for defenders.
But that's for everybody,
that's
right?
Everyone.
But if you're a midfield player, you're constantly on the M25, aren't you? Everything's going around you all the time. So your visualization of how you see the game, you're going to see the game in two ways. You're going to see the game facing your goal and facing the other goal.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're a defender, you're only seeing the ball facing forwards.
Yeah.
You're seeing the game facing forwards, and most forwards are only seeing the game facing backwards. So from a midfield point of view, you're always competing, because the ball, to win the ball there, you're always competing, and you have to have your basic core skills have to be on point all the time. So you're passing and receiving all the time. Hopefully you're playing forward. So midfield players, there's different ways of playing midfield. As we know now, a lot of the times people are talking about holding midfield players or number 10s, but I think everybody's a number 8. and you mould yourself to one of those positions based on your characteristics. And the characteristics will be based on what you like to do, what's been given to you by the spirits, and what you are actually good at.
Yeah.
Because you might think you're good at something, but you're not actually good at it.
Yeah.
You know.
Forwards, Chris, obviously that trends have changed. Number 9's maybe not the number 9 anymore, and the wingers, etc. Like, is there some sort of principles that you could apply?
Well, what you have to look at is the list of things that forwards do, and it will be based on your characteristics. So, are you a dribbler or you run with the ball? Can you hold it up, or are you going to run in behind? Now, you might have all of those.
Yeah.
But what you have to look at is the player, and see what they're actually good at, and then you look at the different types of finishes.
Yeah.
So you're looking at, most people do their shooting practices outside the box, when really hardly any goals are scored outside the box.
Yeah.
So, people don't work on slotting, and just passing the ball into the net. I worked with Michael Bill at QPR, and we used to do, so me and him used to take the forwards, and we would just do things like, you see when Pep used to worked with Raheem Sterling, he's finishing at the far post. You see Harry Kane finishing at the far post. They just side foot it in. You see how many chances are missed like that. So people don't work on slotting. They don't work on scruffy finishing. Every finishing drill people do is clean with no bobbles in it and no pressure.
Yeah, good point.
So which doesn't happen, never happens.
So how would you, in a session, replicate reality?
Well, if you're working with kids, young ones, well, no, I even do it with pros. You know the game we used to play, Wembley?
Yeah.
Yeah, just do that. And control it.
Yeah.
You can control it by taking more players out and more and having more defenders, less defenders.
Yeah.
And just control it. Have balls coming in, give people minimal touches. Now, don't get me wrong. At the beginning of their journey, ball striking might be something that they need to work on. So they need to work on that unopposed, where you can correct their technique. But in the end, most goals are not scored like you're on a brochure. Most goals are scored, you're falling over, or it comes to you quickly and you've got to make a quick decision. So working on the different types of finishing is so important.
On the grassroots, I'm just thinking to our team, our Saturday side, Chris, how would you, because all kids want to shoot, right? All grassroots kids, when you first come up, unless you've got the exercise ready to go, they've all got the balls and they're all shooting on their mates.
Yeah.
Would you encourage that? How would you get the reps, maybe more from a technique perspective of shooting on goal at the grassroots level?
Yeah, when they're on their own, their experimentation part of thing is important. Just let them do it, because they'll find that they'll work on things that you probably can't even coach.
Yeah.
So they'll do some passes that you think, oh, that was good, but you can't really even coach it. It's something that they've developed themselves, and they've worked on it. But I think if you're working on finishing, that's going to be realistic. Then you have to look at how you put the interferences and the distractions in to make sure that their technique's right when there's pressure.
Yeah.
It's
automatic.
It's automatic.
Yeah.
So most goal scorers don't score beautiful goals.
Yeah.
There's only been a few, your Mark Hugheses and people like that, who score goals, overhead kicks and stuff like that. Most goal scorers score simple goals.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You can think, right, all the best ones at the moment probably are doing that at the moment, aren't they? Chris, all right, brilliant. Most common question we always get asked is mixed ability players at the grassroots level and ways to address a session or think about a session where, you've got better players and more beginner players, and how you put on something that's appropriate basically for everybody. How would you think about that, Chris? What would your plan or advice be?
Well, you have to look at how big the gap is. So you can't, if you've got, lots of people say put best with best.
Yeah.
No, that's I don't agree with that.
Right.
There's times for that to happen, but I don't agree with that. What happens is if you only ever put, if a B graded player only play with B graded players, then they'll stay B. Yeah. So you need. I'll give you an example. So if we're at Tottenham and we got Harry Kane as a young centre forward, whatever, you got Ryan Mason, who's older than him, playing in the reserves. Harry comes short. Ryan plays it in behind. They have a chat. Ryan says to him, "Listen, when I take it out of my feet, there, that's the key for you to spin. Brilliant. So you've got an A-graded player at that time with a B-graded player at that time. So the A-graded player is helping the B-graded player to become an A-grade. Then you might go on a couple of years on, and you've got Harry Winks comes in, and you've got Harry Kane's playing. He takes it out of his feet, and Harry Kane, and he spins. Harry Winks plays it short. Harry Kane then says to Harry Winks, listen, when I do that, I'm going to spin. So now,
brilliant.
He's going to do that. But if you don't have the teacher on the pitch, then the B-graded players never get to be A-graded, never get to be A-graded players. So too many times what you will find in grassroots teams is you have one really strong team and then a team that's really weak.
Yeah.
The really weak teams hardly ever progress to into the A team.
So if the age group was the same and you've got the A and B situation, Chris, would you actually recommend to amalgamate the teams and for training, mix them up so half of the good A side and half of the B side are training together on the technical stuff that you're doing or in games, or what would you recommend?
All the technical stuff has a continuum. So if you're passing side foot passing and the A-graded players are now getting bored, there's loads of things you can add to that. You can add a move, you can have two touch, you can play with the outside of your foot.
Yeah.
So you have to have it in your locker to understand when to move those players on and when to keep the other players doing what they're comfortable doing.
Yeah.
So if you haven't got that in the locker, what you're doing is you're going to train everybody the same at the same level. That's like going into a classroom and giving everybody just the same lesson. You don't do that.
Yeah.
What you do is you give them the lesson that is broad structure, and then that's why you have different levels.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things you can do when you're doing things is have the overlearners. I always talk about people being overlearners. So when you're doing something that's too easy for them, helping the players that are not very good. So if it's a passing drill, you might be saying to them, right, you're going to pass that into them, and you're going to test them passing it in their weight. So they're actually thinking about how they're helping the player, and you might give the other player 2 or 3 touches to get the ball back. You might give this player 1 touch to get the ball back, or you might give this player 2 touches, wait for that player to be ready. So that player is helping the other player. So one teaches the other.
Would it be the same principle when you get to the small-sided games section of your session, Chris? Would you also mix them, or is that where maybe you'd let the A's compete against one another in the?
Sometimes you would do that, or you have to look at that, because there is a balance between working on everything. So what you don't want to do is be 6 out of 10 out of everything. Yeah. You know, sometimes you want to you want to make sure that people are, 8s and 9s at what they're doing. So you don't want to dilute it too much, and also you don't want to put the players in, the weaker players, in such a position when they never touch the ball.
Yeah.
So that's a balance.
Okay.
And also you have to look at when we were at Spurs, we did a thing. We got it from Lyngby actually in Copenhagen. So it's like 25% too hard, 25% too easy, and then 50% at the level that you should be at.
Is that a football specific approach, or is that an education?
That was what they were doing
at the club.
So we took it.
Interesting. Do you think that's something that's applicable to grassroots, Chris? Would you look at that for a mixed ability grassroots side? Yeah. So 25% too hard, 25% too easy, and 50%
just normal,
mixed relevant.
Yeah, just normal relevant to their abilities.
Wow. And in your session planning, I'm just trying to think that through. How would you approach that in your session planning? You're breaking down the parts, the topics that you want to coach in that session, and then saying, how do I make it harder, that bit? How do I make that bit easier? And then 50%, this is relevant.
Or sometimes making things harder is not just about the session plan. It's about what you expect. So 2 players on the pitch, two players on the pitch, you're doing cross-field passing for argument's sake, and you've got a seasoned pro, and they receive, play wide. 10, he has 10, so he may 4 of his passes might go astray, which means he's done 6 good ones. Then you've got someone who's not as competent as him, who not as competent as him, and he does six good ones, right? So when you look at it, the competent player is actually failing, because he should be at 8. So you can't judge them the same. So what normally happens is if the younger player or the player that's not deemed to be good, so well, for argument's sake, if the pro did 7 and this player did 5, they're almost at the same, really, because of the level of the ability they're going into the drill, with. So it's what you expect from the player is the difference of making it harder and easier.
Again, Chris, going back to mixed ability, grassroots sides, where you've got too many players, maybe you haven't got enough players. Have you got any advice on how to simply communicate what you're trying to do, which is help them, obviously? I'm just thinking about the context of, balls flying about, there's too many people there or not enough. Is there any...
The thing about too many people, and we've all had it, and it's really difficult to control it sometimes, it's just about first of all, I think if you can't control a group, you can't coach.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important that before the session starts, that you understand what your structure is going to be. So if you've got, I don't know, 32 players, for argument's sake, you might break them up. Do my maths here. That'd be 4 groups of 8, wouldn't it?
Oh no, you put me on the spot. But you'd make sure that
you know what the groups are before.
Yeah.
So when you go over there, they're working in concise groups, and then you can mix it.
Yeah.
Whereas if you just let them play, you're gonna see half the problem about too many people is that lots of the players don't get on the ball, don't get an opportunity to play.
Yeah. And then they lose concentration or lose focus.
They're not enjoying themselves.
Yeah. What about behaviour, Chris? Like, again, thinking about that grassroots level where you've got mixed concentration levels, mixed focus, mixed abilities and stuff. And you mentioned about the importance of the coach organising or controlling the group. How do you set the standard for the sort of type of behaviour you're looking for?
Generally, set the standard. We have a safety zone. So if you're looking at grassroots, so all the bags go here, we'll put the cones in there. So that sets the standard straight away. There's no bottles hanging around. There's no equipment outside this safety zone. So you put that, everybody knows that.
Yeah.
So straight off you do that. Now, there's two ways of dealing with setting standards. You can set standards in the warm-up by making sure the warm-up is structured. So you can talk to the players during the warm-up. Or you can set the standards by getting one of the kids to take the warm up, who's got a leadership feel about themselves. So there's a couple of different ways, but as soon as you come in, you set the standard by, look, we're not having an environment that isn't conducive to us playing.
And if a player sort of steps out of line and behaviour is an issue, how would you address that, Chris? Like, what would your recommendation be? Is that would you sideline the player and say, look, that's 5 minutes where you're not playing? Would you speak with the parent immediately?
It depends. It depends how many times they did it, or what there was. You always start with sweets. Always give them. Always put the olive branch out to make sure that there's not something that you might have addressed them in a way that they didn't think was right. So always start with offering talking to them in a way that should really endear them to the situation.
Yeah. And give them a second chance, basically.
Yeah, or talk to, and make sure that they know that this is the standard.
Yeah. And
everybody else is going to fall to the standard. You're going to be the odd one out. Now, obviously, if they continually don't comply, then the next thing is you're going to have to compromise their playing time or training time by speaking to the parent and addressing it.
Yeah. All right. Brilliant, Chris. So now some questions pretty specific. So looking at the younger age groups, mixed ability under 18, what's your advice on what they should put in their weekly, once a week training session? What should they focus on? Should they be looking at last week, next week, or is this just technical work, enjoyment?
Technical work and enjoyment, and anything that you feel that they can improve on, because they're going to want to improve.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So they're going to want to improve. So looking at you look at trends, don't you? So if it's a fact that they're not getting to the ball, or they're not shooting early enough, or they're not brave enough to take people on one, you might just look at things. You might just look at something like that, you know.
Yeah. Okay. And again, in that under 8 age group, we've got a question from one of our Instagram followers around, and it's interesting, Chris. It's my 7-year-old struggles with the physical side at 7. How do I support them with that?
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing you can really do.
Yeah.
You can't make them do weight training now. Do you know what I mean? At the end of the day, that's just about patience, and then giving them examples of small players that have done well. You know, I'm fortunate because of having been at 2 clubs for so long. We've got examples. We've got pictures of players playing when they were young, and then what they ended up being like. So it's about trying to, as much as we give them examples of long shot goals or overhead kicks, we can also give them examples of players that struggled when they were small. I mean, obviously we all know that Messi, needed help when he was a young player.
Yeah, and I guess that what you're trying to do is keep the kid engaged and enthused about playing still, because I would assume in that situation where maybe the physical side is affecting how they're enjoying the game, you can see how they might become disheartened maybe,
or play them with the 6s if there's under 6. I don't know many teams that do it, but play them where they're physically capable. So don't forget, the program should not be, it should, in my opinion, it should be a capability based, not just age is just part of it. So it should be capability based. So if they're not capable of playing with the group that they are there with, and it might not be down to technique, it just might be down to the physicality, then put them where it's appropriate.
In the academy level now, Chris, is that what they're doing in terms of age group? Like, do they sort of a smaller, let's say 10, would he train with the 9s, or?
It depends how brave the people are and how much they want to win. So it depends. We had Tom Carroll and Alex Pritchard. They both played across. Yeah. They played across in their first year of their scholarship. They didn't play in the youth team. They played, and they went on to do well. So basically, it's about how patient you are. So what happens is we played them where it was appropriate for them to develop, and when they were physically ready, we moved them to where they needed to go.
Yeah. Common question I think you probably get a lot, Chris, is at what age should coaches start teaching shape? When do you think that's relevant?
Okay, so if you look at it, we have a development pyramid, and at the bottom it's extreme technique, and then we look at, when we go up next, because the pitches get bigger, you have to have a shape, don't you? So you're looking at, when do the pitches get bigger? Probably under 11ish.
Yeah. So my son, he's 13 next year, and that's the first year, under 13, first year of 11v11.
Yeah, but I think as soon as you start doing 7 aside, I think there has to be a shape. Yeah. And I think the shape should start off, and then it's only recovering into shape. Yeah. So you look at, we call it movement experimentation. So that's where people play in different parts of the pitch. They don't know exactly where they're going to end up. Are they going to be a defender? Are they going to be a forward? We don't know yet. So generally, when the pitches start getting big, I would say you have to start off with a shape anyway. If you're playing a game, I think you start off with a shape. Yeah. Under 9s. Yeah. But how rigid that shape is going to be dependent on what you're trying to achieve. And
what do you think, Chris, is a healthy balance for the kid of experience in different positions, and when does that change? When are they assigned a position, and can you tell us a little bit about that ideal journey?
All right, so if you're brave, you'll get the players to play in different parts of the pitch. So that's how we look at it, different parts of the pitch, not different positions. Right. So that may enhance your defensive abilities, or it might enhance your attacking abilities. But if you don't know, then what you're going to do is you're going to be stuck at one position. So if you have a team that wins all the time and they've got 4 brutes at the back, how do you know that player wouldn't have been better off in midfield? How do you know? You don't know. No. So it depends on what your objectives are.
But you wouldn't, I assume, Chris, you wouldn't rotate or give players, young people, like multiple experiences in one game, or would you say like Johnny's going to play in that part of the pitch today and that part of the pitch next week, or how would you look at rotating it?
Depending how old they were. The younger they are, I wouldn't care.
Yeah,
they play anywhere. When they start getting to more fixed scenarios, then I would give them probably 1 or 2 experiences during a game.
Yeah.
One of the mistakes people make is they'll say, right, you're playing right back and then you're playing left wing. That's not. It's not.
I've done it.
Really going to help.
Yeah.
But if they're young, it doesn't matter because it's still just football, and the whole thing is just football. But if you want to try to develop somebody, you start getting to 15s. 14s, 15s, you're looking at, right, I'm probably going to be at the top half of the pitch player or back half of the pitch player. So you might play left wing and left back, or you might play left wing and midfield.
Yeah.
But you're not really going to play left wing and centre half.
Right.
Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying there's not special circumstances when that might happen. But it depends on what your development process is.
Okay. Goalkeepers, Chris. So this is a big question we get a lot as well. Obviously, everyone looks to the top part of the pyramid and all the brilliant goalkeepers we have, particularly being brave on the ball and how they distribute. What's your advice on grassroots coaches, how they recruit players, what they're asking their goalkeepers to do? What do you think?
Most of the young kids all have a go in goal at some stage during the season. Yeah. They should play in goal at some stage, or even in a game. They should all do it. We had a player, Luke McGee, who came as an outfield player, and then he's a league player now. Plays for Portsmouth. He was an outfield player. Right. Now he's a goalkeeper. Yeah.
Unbelievable. Yeah, amazing. And would you encourage even at the youth level, Chris? Considering, let's assume that we value development as much as sort of the winning or losing, or winning. Would you encourage players to be brave, goalkeepers, in these sort of games that you have on the weekends? Would you encourage them to be brave, get involved in play, try to distribute?
Yeah, it's part of your game now that you've got. People want you to do it. I think it's gone over the top, in my opinion, and I'm saying that being one of the sort of people that was a massive advocate for it 20 odd years ago when people was criticising us for doing it. I think it's still football. So what happens is people get pressed and they play to the person who's got 2 men on him. That's not a good decision anywhere on the pitch. So a couple of years ago, when I was talking to some of the coaches I had, they dinosaured me off a little bit because I was saying, look, if there's nowhere to play the ball, then you have to play over the press into the forward. And you're going back to the 80s. But if you look at, to just give you an example, you see the alleged handball by the Crystal Palace goalkeeper the other day.
Yeah.
Where did the ball come from?
Yeah.
Came from the length of the pitch over the top.
Man City mix it amazingly like that, don't they?
So as much as people think that they're tippy tappy, they're not.
Yeah.
So let's think about it. Football's just football. If what you play where the space is.
Yeah. My experience at the grassroots level, Chris, is the goalie. I've had a realisation that that basically will help us determine how we want to play. If the goalie can get involved, our defenders or midfielders are confident that they can join in the play and help us possess the ball. That helps dictate how we want to play on the weekend. But if we had a goalie maybe that wouldn't be so comfortable, obviously that's going to dictate another way that we've got to play.
Of course, no, I can see that. But the thing is, at the end of the day, the goalkeeper, one of the things that we had with goalkeepers that used to go on loan, they'd come back with pulled thighs and stuff like that because we are only tippy-tappy in. So they'd go and play in League 2, where they're not rolling it out on a regular basis.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Depending on the club that they're at. So it's still important to get the goalkeepers to understand that kicking it long is part of their passing.
Yeah. Yeah. Why do goalies have that ability, Chris, you work with so many good ones? How can they hit it so hard or so far and so effortlessly? What?
Practice.
Yeah. I think it's underappreciated how well they strike the ball.
Unbelievable. They're the best passers. They can drop it where they drop it. They're great goalkeepers, and you got to put your hands together for the goalkeeping coaches.
Yeah. A couple of quick ones, Chris, on, I guess now, particularly in the grassroots area, what coaches should think about when they move from a different format to another. So, for example, 7v7 up to 9v9 or 9v9 up to 11v11. Is there any general points you can give coaches about that jump up?
They've still got to stick to the principles of the game.
Yeah.
If you stick to the principles, it doesn't matter what format you're playing. So how you pass it, how you receive, who you pass it to, where the angles are going to be, who dribbles, when do you dribble. You know, it's first of all, have the principles, and then you mould your principles into the format or the shape that you want.
Very good. And that's relevant whether you're going 5-5 up to 7v7.
Or whether you're playing first team or whether you're playing grassroots.
And would that be consistent, Chris? Because I know at QPR, I remember you saying like that's something we worked on, is that consistency from, that connects all the age groups. Yeah. Is that obviously important?
It's important that people are good at the basics.
Yeah.
Because if you're good at the basics, you can play for anyone, can't you?
Yeah.
So it's really important. I think passing and receiving is underrated in what they do, and they don't really. A lot of people don't realise how you receive the ball allows you to be exciting.
Yeah.
If you don't receive it properly, you're not going to be able to take anybody on, or you're not going to be able to see a pass. So I see lots of people doing these complicated drills that have no relevance to the match.
Right.
And sometimes the actual ability of the player to receive the ball. You imagine you receive the ball, you open out. As soon as you open out as a fullback, how many things happen? The number 7 drops, the centre forward comes short, the other centre forward or the 10 runs on. So all of a sudden there's a chain reaction. Your centre mid comes short, your centre half drops off. Just on the ball rolling to you and you opening out. So if now all of a sudden it's under your body, no one can make a relevant move, can they?
Makes sense. Were you at Tottenham, Chris, when Modric was there?
Yeah.
What can you talk a little bit about? Because was he the best that you've seen do those things?
He's incredible. He's won the Ballon d'Or and it speaks for itself.
Yeah.
And a very modest man as well.
Yeah. I saw something with Harry Redknapp recently saying like at Tottenham initially they wouldn't pass him because the positions he was taking he was too close to defenders.
Yeah.
And when they worked it out, no.
Just give it to him.
Give it to him. He can deal with it.
Yeah.
Was that your sort of experience?
Well, when you look at players like him, he is a special player, and his ability to. I mean, if you look at him, most of his passing is basic: get it, receive it, play. When he needs something out the locker, it's in the locker.
Yeah.
But a lot of times when you see people, even in grassroots or young teams, everyone thinks everything's about spinning it and. What they see on YouTube, when really it's not. It's about being really good at the basics that gives you the foundation to do the spinning and the taking people on.
Yeah, brilliant. One of the most successful or most popular segments we did last time, Chris, was on defending. So we've got a couple of questions on defending. Again, this one's related to size. So what can a much smaller defender do to be a good defender, I guess, to compensate the fact that they're not very tall or strong?
Well, I think reading the play and seeing the ball. So if you've got someone the first things first, it's always, if you can stop the turn, then the ball goes backwards. It's as good as a tackle, right? So first things first, if you stop the turn, you don't have to tackle.
How do you do that, Chris?
Well, you read the play and read the weight of the pass, how close you are to the player that's going to receive it, and how quick are you. Because if you think I'm going to stop the turn and it's taking you an age to get there, and by the time you get there they've turned, they're going to be taking you on, or you're running too fast and you bump into them, they just roll you.
Yeah.
So you got to keep your eye on the ball and the weight of the pass, and then you got to know your own physical capabilities.
Sure.
Are you quick, or can you get there? The distance between you and the defender, can you actually get there to stop the turn? And that's the first thing. If you're not big, they're not probably going to roll you if you just touch them.
Yeah.
So don't push them, just touch them so they know you're there. They'll pass it.
Yeah.
And then as soon as they pass it, drop 2 yards.
Interesting. Okay.
Then, but when you've dropped 2 yards, that's only because if they've passed it, they might play in behind you. So what you're looking at, you're going to drop 2 yards, but still keep your eye on the ball in case they pass it to the forward again.
Okay. Is there? I assume, Chris, you can add value too with the communication part and how you help manage the game. Is that right? Because I would assume, obviously, goalie and defenders obviously have a good view of the pitch. What would you recommend also, maybe for a smaller player, in terms of the other bits and pieces he could do to help the side?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if communication is important because it dictates what the people around, if they listen, if they do what they do around you. So sometimes you can not even get exposed by talking to people in front of you, and also it puts off the player receiving the ball. The person receiving the ball thinks this person's confident, or they're directing play in one way, and they might try to do something that's not on.
Yeah.
So communication is really important.
For young people, Chris, that might struggle with confidence and maybe they're a bit quieter and introverted, is there just an acceptance that they might never be that way? They might not assert themselves in that way, or can you help them develop I'm thinking particularly about a very talented goalie we work with, who probably that's the bit of the game that needs most.
I think sometimes you have to accept people's personalities.
Yeah.
So if you looked at someone, say like Legley King, outstanding captain, outstanding player, but he's a different type of captain to some of the others who's, fist wavers.
Yeah.
He's a technical leader as well as his presence. And so you can't say he's not an effective captain, but he's not a screamer and shouter. So sometimes you have to accept the type of person that person is. Now you can try and help, because obviously when they're young there's still a lot of development to come, and it might be just getting them to say one or two things, or putting sessions on where you're putting them in situations where they have to communicate with the back line.
You mentioned like great captains like that, Chris. When you think about leadership and maybe more the subtle qualities of leadership, particularly for younger players, what do you think they are for grassroots players? Because there's obvious people, right, where you're like, they can lead the team, but there's also people that emerge. And what do you think those qualities are?
Well, I think the qualities are not always obvious. People think that sometimes that they see a young kid and they think because he's talking that's leadership. But it's also about how they conduct themselves. Where like I said, you have different types of leaders. You have verbal leaders, you have technical leaders, you have different types of ways that people can show leadership. So it's important that if you're a coach, that you recognise the strengths in people first, and then try to really just bring it out with them. So sometimes you might buddy players up. You might have a little bits of group work where you give people. So say you've got 3 groups doing a passing drill or doing a square or whatever it might be. You might be involved in taking one of the squares, and you might encourage another player to lead that square, so who's in and who's out and stuff like that. So just give little tasks that allow them to use their voice and use their personality. And
Matchday, Chris, would you encourage sort of experience of captaincy going round the team, for example, at a certain age or under a certain age? And when would you say, no, that's established, it might be relevant to have one captain and that's where we go?
Yeah, I think once you start getting to 11 aside, I think one captain is probably more relevant than the young kids. Anyone can be captain as a young player, and passing it around, I think, is quite good. Listen, but also remember, being captain can be frightening for some kids.
Yeah, sure.
So it's really important to give them it if they want to do it. Yeah. And I think it's really important because you never know what's going to emerge.
Yeah. One of the things too, Chris, we got as a question was, the approach where we give equal playing time at, maybe what age group do you think that's relevant to, like under 10 or under 12, or what do you think? I
think I don't know about equal, but I think relevant,
Relevant, okay.
So, for argument's sake, if you're signed a player, you can't, they should be playing a good portion of each game. Now, doesn't mean if someone plays 50% that someone else plays 75%.
Right.
That's not equal. But the player who's only played 50% has played a portion of the game.
Yeah.
You can't, letting them come, drive an hour and a half to play 10 minutes. I don't agree with that. I think that's a form of abuse, in my opinion. Unless it's known that that's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
One of the things that we looked at about dealing with that type of thing is, for argument's sake, say someone lives, say we're playing Charlton, for argument's sake, and we're at QPR. So anyone who lives near Charlton would play. Now, we didn't put this straight into place. We were on the way to doing it, but we were looking at it. So the players that were there they'd only play one quarter because they live close. So the further away you lived, the more you played.
Yeah.
So now the people that live near Charlton, if we're playing Brentford's, for argument's sake, now they're going to play more than the people that live in Shepherd's Bush. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So the parents are not driving on a Sunday morning 2 hours, hour and a half for their son to play or their daughter to play 10 minutes.
Yeah. So that makes sense.
But it's a difficult one because it's a juggling act.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it's also so then you're looking and saying, right, so we're keeping a core of the team on most of the time so that they get some continuity in the game, and then the subs that come on are not thinking to themselves, I've been here all this time and I haven't played.
Do you think I think that's a really interesting way to approach it, Chris. Do you think it's a bit harsh if a player turns up late pre-match to say maybe they were starting in your thoughts before that and they've turned up late and you said because you're late you can't start? I mean, thinking what you say, that's harsh, isn't it?
They don't drive the car, do they?
That is so harsh, and I'm sorry to say, I think that our grassroots team, we've approached it that way. But just listen to you speak there, that is harsh, isn't it?
Well, yeah, of course it is because they don't drive the car, do they?
Yeah.
Yeah. And imagine if you're a young player sitting in that car, you're probably tapping your foot. Come on, the lights.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't agree with it. I don't think you should punish the player for what adults do. I don't agree with that.
Last time you also talked about thinking of the length of the season and giving mixed ability players their opportunity when it makes sense. So, for example, cup final, maybe the minutes would be reduced.
Yeah.
And you still think that's relevant and good advice? And
yeah, I think the thing is that you have to look at how the season is. So the mixed ability is important. Listen, let's be honest. Everybody wants to win.
Yeah.
There's nobody starts the game saying, well, I hope we only lose 4-0.
Yeah.
So everybody wants to win. So there are times where winning should be at the top of the list. And really, winning is at the top of the list. You go out to win the game. Mm-hmm. So there's going to be times where you're going to go out there and you're going to think, right, we're going to put our strongest team to today. The kids need it. It's a confidence boost. And, we want them to have that feel good situation.
Yeah.
So you look at the length of the season sometimes, and you also have to look at where you are in the league. If you're a grassroots team and you can't win the league, then it makes your life easier because you can play the mixed group, the mixed level kids as much as you want. If you can win the league, then you might be looking and thinking that things like you're playing in one of the really weak teams and you're 4-0 up in the first 10 minutes, then you can get your players on, so everybody then feels that they're part of it. So there are times where, at the end of the day, the higher up you go, it's more ruthless.
Yeah.
And people do have to understand being sub and not playing is part of the game at times. You know.
Yeah. Brilliant, Chris. That's great. Okay, we've almost run out of time. We've been speaking for ages. Really appreciate it, and I've learnt loads as per usual. We like to do at the end, if that's all right, Chris, just 3 tips. The first one's around players' confidence. Are there 3 things that you'd sort of recommend to grassroots coaches to help with players' confidence?
Find as quickly as you can what they're good at, and make sure that you polish that over things that they're not good at.
Yeah.
Unless the things they're not good at are essential.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
And you said something earlier about overpraise.
Overpraise things that they can't do that they try to do.
Yeah. So that might be a left-footed shot.
Might be a left-footed shot. They've had a shot, and you don't say it's gone over the bar, and you don't go. You're going to go, it's well done, little Johnny or little Tammy. You know, well done. You know.
Okay, brilliant. This is quite a difficult question for you to describe, Chris. Are there 3 things that you would recommend in terms of the particular topics or drills? Difficult to describe drills, but 3 topics you think that every grassroots coach should sort of get familiar with and try and learn up on and deliver in their sessions?
I think grassroots coaches should. I think I praise them, because without them we haven't got a football system. The platform comes from them.
Yeah.
First of all, realise what they're in it for. So where is their ego directed? So we've all got an ego. People say don't have an ego. No, you have to have an ego, because otherwise you'll never get better at anything. So, but it depends where it's directed. Is it directed at you winning for you, or is it directed at you making the players better? So it's, for me, I think coaches should be looking at, right, I want to be the one that's helped that player to get better. Yeah. I want to be the one that's helped that group to win that cup and enjoy it and stuff like that. So that's where my ego as a coach, especially grassroots, would be facing.
Yeah. So
you've got to think, you've got to tweak your thoughts of where your ego is pointing.
And is that also your motivation, Chris? Why you're doing it in the first place?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Is there any specific topics that, you mentioned the importance obviously of passing and receiving. Let's say at the U12 age group, what are the 3 topics that you'd say coaches, study that, use that a lot in your sessions, etc.?
We have a thing called 75s, and it's like a whole skit of passes that you use, and the only passes that you use. We've broken them down into numbers. So what you use the most, we train the most. So the most passes you do are inside foot passes. So we train them more than anything else. And then the next lot outside of the boot, next lot inside outside, the next lot across the body outside of the foot, and then a reverse pass, and then over 20 yards punch through past. Every position on the pitch will use them passes. And then obviously if you're talking about distance, you're talking about no bounce, 1 bounce, 2 bounce passes for ball fill. So whatever you're going to do, yes, when there's no concentration on it, do what you like. Yeah. If you want to get better yourself, you got to know how to teach.
You saying bounces, Chris? So you prescribe to a player, you got to hit it from there to there, and it's got to be 2 bounces. I don't think people appreciate how difficult that's incredible. And then if you add pressure to it as well, and they can.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is when people do long passing, what do? They just think great ball, right? Because it looks good because it's gone over a distance, right? When the receiver receives it round their neck here, is it a great ball? No, because by the time it hits the floor, the defender's there.
Yeah.
If you drop it in and it's a 1 bounce pass, then what are you going to do? You've got a coaching scenario.
Yeah.
So the coaching scenario, how you hit it, where it bounces, and then what part of the body do you receive it on? Soft bit, big bit, soft bit. How do you receive it? If it's a 2 bounce pass, you just take it offline, you're running with it.
Class. I listened to a podcast recently, Chris, with a basketball player called Jason Williams, and he's a great point guard in the NBA. And he was saying that his job was to basically assists. So he'd know the shooting guards that he's passing to, if they like to receive it on the logo or the valve, and he'd make sure it's in their hands so they could catch shoot.
Exactly.
And I guess that's what you're saying about delivery and
How many times do you see people? If you see the other day, he's played a ball outside of the boot right into the path of the guy.
Yeah.
As it arrives, the guy just takes it and runs with it.
Yeah.
There's no controlling it and stuff like that. But listen, it's not always ideal to do that, to play like that. What I'm trying to say is, it's about appreciating how the receiver is going to get the ball. So when we practice, you have to practice ball feel.
Yeah.
Ball feel is, can you control that? If I ask you, can you play that, no bounces, and arrive there below waist height? You have to concentrate.
So difficult.
Yeah, you have to concentrate.
Yeah.
So you're not just playing a crossfield ball that's going to go off the pitch.
Yeah.
So you're playing the ball into the channel. How many bounces? Probably got to be 2, so they can run onto it. Now 2 or more, so they can run onto it. If it's a 1 bounce pass, it's going to bounce off the pitch.
Is it almost like a language, Chris? Like it's the cue. Like I'm doing that because you automatically going to do that. It's the intelligence that's required as well.
But if you've got the techers,
you can do it.
You can play in different teams and
Yeah.
you can play at different levels. If you're just doing a crossfield ball because you're strong and you can just hit it there, you're not helping. You're not helping the receiver.
Also, the understanding, Chris, the snapshot understanding that's what's required right now. I think that people undervalue how difficult all this is.
It is, but if it's automated, you'll choose it.
How do you? Well, this is probably another podcast. Automation, like how is that?
The skill acquisition. You know what you see, what your peripheral nervous system against your central nervous system.
Yeah.
You know, when you touch it on your peripheral nervous system, should tell you how many steps to take when you're gonna clip a ball.
Yeah. Chris, brilliant. We've got to do part 3. Really appreciate your time today. Thanks a lot.
Anytime. Thanks for having me in.
Cheers.